When I first talked about starting from scratch after 40, I shared how I had found the courage to begin again in South Korea. But in this part of the story, things have shifted. My husband and I had been living in Florida 10 years deep into a life that we had built from the ground up. When the money dried up and the job offer stopped and the pressure kept rising, we had some decisions to make. We didn't move for adventure. We moved because it felt like the way out from under. This is the story of how we made that decision and why we're so grateful we did. In 2023, we were in a life that we had built over 10 years in Florida. We had, you could say, a comfortable life. We had a home that we owned. We were able to travel and live quite comfortably, but our lives had become what I would say boring, maybe stagnant, and we were getting a sense from God or the universe that some things needed to shift. So what was happening is I was doing real estate investing, and we had an Airbnb that I was managing. We were expanding it. We had another property under contract. My husband had been in a job for 5 years that things had taken a turn, not in a good direction. He had shifted departments and things got even worse. And so by January 2023, he had decided to take a leave of absence to get a sense of what to do next. And with that in mind, 3 months later, so that was January, April, he made a decision that he wouldn't return to the job. So he quit. He started job hunting. The property that we had under contract fell through. So we had a property that we were hoping that we would get. It was a 5-apartment property. And, we were thinking of all the things that we were going to do with that. That deal fell through. And this was April. And with that happening and my husband making the decision not to return to the job, we started to look at how our lives were, how things were changing in our lives. 4 months later, this was August, my husband had put out lots of resumes, had applied for many, many jobs, had done lots of interviews, no job offer. By this point, it had been 8 months since he had had a paycheck. Whatever savings we had dwindled. We were at this point using credit cards to help cover some of our monthly expenses. We were way overextended. And I looked at it. This was the beginning of August. I looked at our situation. I assessed it. And I said to myself, my husband is doing his best. He's, trying so many different ways to get a position. Nothing was turning. I said, I probably can find a position in another industry that would cover us, but I thought we needed to move to another country. So I suggested that we could move to Mexico. And my husband was absolutely not hearing it. He was not open to Mexico at all. As a matter of fact, he wasn't even open to leaving the US at that time. That was the beginning of August. Anyway, it was just a conversation at that point, but I knew in my heart, and he knew too, something needed to shift, but it wasn't Mexico. And toward the end of August, he and I had another conversation, and he was open to teaching in Asia, right? So he and I met as teachers in Asia, in South Korea in particular, back in the early 2000s. So kind of gives you a sense of that. And if you want to know more, I think I shared that in the first video, starting from scratch over 40. So you can go back and check that. Where I am now this is the end of August, and he's open to Asia, but we didn't know exactly where. And I did some research, and Taiwan popped up as a country that supports families. So we were not just individuals. We were already a couple. My older son was planning to join us, supports teachers over 40, and the benefits are great. We applied in September, and he got the job offer for this city in November. And by this time, November, it was around Thanksgiving in the US when the job offer came, and we moved here at the end of December 2023. So We got here, I think, on the 31st of December, 2023. So that takes us to where we are now. And what is beautiful about being here in Taiwan is it's Asia with an island feel. And I'm an island girl, so I feel right at home here in Taiwan. What fears or doubts came up before the move? So when I asked my husband this question, he said he was worried that he wouldn't be able to communicate because he didn't have any Mandarin. He didn't speak Mandarin. He also was worried about not having a car. For me, I was less concerned about the language barrier and not having a car, but I was concerned about finding food that I could eat and finding healthcare to suit my needs. Because when I lived in Florida, I had a nutrition response therapist that I would see her every 2 weeks. I also ate gluten-free food, right? So I was concerned about that. And I also saw the dentist every 3 months. So I was wondering how that would work. I was worried about eating the wrong food and what that might do to me and how I was going to manage if I didn't have the right health care. I also, the other thing that came up was I dreaded the thought of managing properties from so far away. What did it feel like to follow the whisper? We both found that as soon as we agreed to say yes, the ways opened up. We had initially planned to sell the homes that we have in Florida, but eventually we decided to rent them and we found the perfect property manager to manage the properties for us. And when we started to follow the whisper, there was a feeling of relief from me. I found a nonprofit company that could help us to negotiate our credit card debt. I think I mentioned that we had started to live off our credit cards. We had about $40,000 in credit card debt, and it felt like most of what we had that was coming in was going toward paying this credit card every month. And something that I noticed was that we were paying like 10 different bills every month, and that really added up. And so when I found this particular program, it helped us because we were able to pay one bill. They cut off thousands of dollars off of the interest when they negotiated the debt for us. And so instead of paying 10 bills, we've got one bill and we're saving money. So that felt like a huge relief. We were also able to find a personal mailbox that allows our mail to be forwarded to a mailbox. And that's huge too. There was a coordinator assigned to my husband when he agreed to teach here. And that coordinator is an angel, still is. 18 months later, he still is an angel to us because he arranged everything. He was able to, before we left Florida, he had started to look for the right home for us, right? He started searching and he would get back to us to let us know how it was going. He arranged the car to pick us up from the airport. They came with a banner so we would know, with our names on it. He arranged to take us to buy groceries for the very first time and to everything that we needed to set up our apartment for the first time here. He arranged it. So everything was, I would say, he was like our everything. We didn't need to know Mandarin. I didn't have the language myself. I know a few words 18 months later, but I still don't know much. But this coordinator became like that. He became everything. The translator, the negotiator. He negotiated with the landlord for the apartment that we live in. He took us to the stores, showed us the ropes, so to speak, to help us get started. And so it's incredible what happens when you're willing to follow the whisper. Saying yes, we found a life of greater ease, more peace, less debt, more savings, more connection, and a greater quality of life overall. If you're at a crossroads, maybe this is your sign to say yes. Let me know in the comments if this is resonating. Thanks so much for watching. See you on the next one.